I keep bringing back this analogy. Back when I first started using FileMaker, FileMaker was so much fun because it allowed you to do these things that you couldn't do. It allowed you to put pieces of the puzzle together and accomplish different tasks. And now that's kind of where I feel like AI is at. Like, we're getting access to this ability to build tools on the fly. And it's super exciting because you're not held back. It's super fun. For me, it's like the Swiss Army knife of the future. Like, you can use it for everything almost, right?
Alrighty, so we're going to do a little roundtable discussion about Cowork and how we're using it day to day at Portage Bay, and got a couple of different people that are going to show us each some stuff that they're doing. I'm looking forward to seeing some of that myself, and I'll get us started talking about a couple of things in Cowork that I like. I'm doing stuff in Claude Code all the time, but I'm using Cowork as sort of my ad hoc Q&A tool. So if I'm in the middle of something in the terminal with Claude Code, I'll often hop out of terminal into Cowork to ask a question about it, or if I want to pick up work on a previous task, I'll pop into Cowork. I like one of the things that I like about Cowork, one of the things about Claude Code that I think it'll be interesting to see it develop over time is its lack of understanding about what happened in previous sessions or what happens on different machines related to what you're working on. It doesn't know, from one terminal session to the next, it doesn't necessarily know what it did in the previous session unless you've spent some time fixing it so that it remembers what it did before. I find that challenging, especially going between two different machines. It has no idea what you did on one machine versus another machine, unless again you address that with some having it keep track of its session between, having it keep track of its memory between machines. I've done a little bit of playing around with keeping Claude's memory in a Git repository and having it push its memory to the Git repository between machines, so that it knows what it did on one machine versus another. But I like
that's pretty sweet. How did you end up doing that, John? Were you use I think you were talking about it. You use GitHub, right? You
yeah,
use Git, which is pretty sweet. But how did you get there?
I did what I think has to be our instinct, or one of our instincts in the modern AI world, is I asked Claude. I told Claude, I said, I'm having I think you're having some trouble because I'm doing some dev work on my laptop and I'm doing some dev work on this dev server. What would you suggest to help keep you up to date about what's happening between the two machines? I don't know if it suggested the Git repository, or I did. I think I might have had that idea. But it wrote some code for itself to push memory information up to its memory.md and claude.md files up from the local machine to the repository. And then it gave itself some updated instructions in its claude.md file, I think, to push information to and pull information from that repository. Just this morning, I was curious because it didn't seem like it was working, and I asked it flat out, "Do you have the latest information from the memory repository?" And it said no. and it said no, I didn't load that, and I haven't gotten around to it, but I need to go back to it and say why. That was the whole point of what we were trying to do. Why are you not loading that information? So I need to get back to that and look at that. Another part of the issue there that I haven't gotten back to looking at is it's a little bit unclear to me. I mean, if I give it the instruction wrap up in either place, it's supposed to update that memory repository. But but sometimes I forget, and so it's not a perfect solution to have it be manually triggered like that, and I need to do a little more looking into what's going on there.
Yeah.
But the nice thing about Cowork is you don't have to do that. Cowork is context sensitive by default. These conversations on the left here are all conversations I've had with Claude previously. So like I'm working on planning a trip with my dad to do a little bit of exploring in June. And so I've been chatting with it a bunch about Wrangell St. Elias National Park up in Alaska. And I can go back to that anytime and pick up that conversation, and it knows everything about what it previously talked about. So that's super handy about Cowork. You can also specify a folder. I've told it that my working folder is a folder on my drive where I've put a bunch of booking information about hotels and such, so it can easily pull information out of those too. It's also another thing that I use about Cowork a lot is your ability to manage your recent conversations. Like this fourth dimension version 19 conversation, I don't need that anymore, so I'm just going to archive that. And so I can keep my conversation list a little bit more manageable. I like that. I like both those things, the ability to go back and pick up on previous conversations, as well as the ability to manage that list, because I ask random questions all the time about little things that I don't really want to track. And so it's nice to be able to get rid of that out of that list.
Cowork only accesses the local file system, right?
I believe so.
Okay.
Isn't it true, you can correct me on this, that when you specify a given folder, that's the only place you're giving permission on your local drive for this to look at, you to keep the rest of the here.
Okay. Yeah, unless you give it more information. And you can also drag files directly into the chat from other places, but it's using that directory as you write stuff to store it in there. And that's sort of the key, which is really helpful when you're needing to like let's look at some finances and let's build an Excel spreadsheet. Let's build a Word document that I'm going to share with my team, that sort of stuff. So it writes it in there. You actually have the physical document. It's not so different than if you're doing it in Google Drive. And I think John is doing a Google Drive share directory that gets pushed to Google. And if you're using Gemini, Gemini has similar features where it can write directly to your documents folder or your drive folders. But this one's nice because everything that it does is stored there. The .md file that it references, the memory, is stored there. And any tooling that is created gets stored there. So it's nice to have it all in one place. So when you come back to the conversation, you can be like, oh, you know what? Let's, the document that you wrote or this report, I need to change such and such, and it just can take off and do it, right? Versus having to drag the full file in again and have it reread the whole file and all that sort of stuff. So
one of my favorite things I've done lately is not very directly FileMaker related at all, but Claude's turned out to be pretty good at generating 3D step files that I can give to my 3D printer. And so I've been able to 3D print some things. And I've been using Cowork for this, although you could probably do this in Claude code in the terminal as well. But it's a steep learning curve to use the modeling tools to create, even if I want to create something fairly simple, like, let's say I wanted to create a 3D model of this little souvenir medal. I could do that, and that's actually within my skill range of AutoCAD's Fusion software. But it would take me a little while, and if it was any more complicated than this, I wouldn't be able to. But I can. I've done this recently with a couple of different things. I can take my digital calipers, and I can carefully measure whatever it is that I'm wanting to create, and I can give Claude those measurements, and I can tell it I did this with a little drain plug for a boat recently. I told it I want a 8mm tall cylinder, 48, not 48, I think it was 28 millimeters in diameter, with a 1mm chamfer around the top edge, with 15 holes, 2.5 millimeters in diameter, equally distributed around the interior of the cylinder. And Claude created the step file, and I was able to load the step file directly into Bamboo, which is the software for printing to the 3D printer, and it did it. Way faster than if I had tried to figure out how to do that in Fusion myself. So that's my new favorite 3D, or my new favorite AI thing, is the ability to tell it what I want to 3D print. It's not perfect. I was doing something else recently, making a cover for an electrical plug, a fairly specific shape, rounded corners, but not uniformly oval, tapers at the bottom. There's no way for me to give it very accurate dimensions, because they're changing across the whole surface. I was still able to get a model printed, and I haven't tested it yet to see if it actually fits, but I'm hopeful.
So, John, would you say how you describe the problem is going to be the measure of your success, whether you get a good outcome or not?
Yeah, I think that's true for everything we're doing with AI. My measurements of the item that I'm trying to print are essentially are my prompt. That's how I'm prompting the AI. And the more carefully and accurately you prompt it, the more likely you are to get what you want. But it matters. Certainly the model matters too. I tried to do that with Gemini, and it didn't seem to be able to create a file that gave me what I wanted. Claude did a better job creating that step file. But yeah, I think prompt engineering is very important. To me also, I think, keeping in mind that I don't have to write the full prompt. I can write part of the prompt and then ask Claude to flesh out the prompt for me, and then I can review the prompt that it generated for completeness and accuracy before giving that final prompt to the AI to try and get what I want back. I think you get you get ideas into your prompt from Claude itself that you might not have thought of, and the opposite's true too. But I think you getting your thoughts into the prompt and the AI getting its thoughts into the prompt are not thoughts, but what it can put in there. You get a more complete picture, I think.
So are you saying that if you omit something from your spec, it's not going to assume something, but it's going to ask you for more specificity?
I do a lot of as I'm trying to develop a prompt, I often ask it, I often tell it things like, ask me questions about this, critique my analysis of this, and make suggestions. It'll come back with a lot of stuff I don't want or I don't care about sometimes. I think one interesting thing to me has been, the AI has a tendency to want to complicate things more than I might have originally, and sometimes I don't want that complication, and sometimes I realize that complication is a good thing. So it just depends on the situation, but I find it helpful to have. It's like having somebody give you a checklist on the fly. I might have thought of 8 of the things on the checklist, but I might not have thought of 2 of them. And having Claude or Gemini come back and say, here's what I would do. And really, when it's saying, here's what I would do, what it's really doing is synthesizing a list from reviewing what 100 other people did. So I'm really sort of in a way getting the input from 100 other people kind of aggregated through the AI in a way. At least that's the way I think of it. You've been working on a Claude plugin, haven't you, Xandon?
Yeah. So, I mean, early on, of course, we know that the different large language models can create XML, and then you can use like the monkey bread software plugin to basically copy and paste that XML into your FileMaker script, which actually was a big reveal recently, because I was struggling with it where it wasn't pasting in, and then like we were having to create a script that would parse the XML and manually create the pasting process and putting it in the clipboard, and then found out that monkey bread software has an XML parser built in for the pasting of it. I'm probably using the wrong terminology, but that's sort of it. Like you copy it into the clipboard and then be able to paste it in your script. And I didn't even know, I wasn't on the most current version of monkey bread software's plugin, but if you get the latest version, it has that in. So, and then you can tell it like, build me a FileMaker script and then set it and copy it to the clipboard, and then you can just paste it in. You of course doing it in XML, but I've been using it as a tool because we do in FileMaker, we can do the save as XML to get the schema, the scripts, everything. And so figuring out how to use that in order to code review all sorts of different things. That's what I had been working on to be able to code review, and it's been I've been pretty amazed with how well it works. So I'll just start out real quick for this little demo. This is Claude Code in the and then upper left-hand corner, I've selected Cowork. So I'm in Cowork, and you can select a folder that you want it to work in. So in this instance, I would select the folder that I've got my XML in, and I've got 2 XML files in there. And then when I was originally building it, I was like, hey, here's an XML file. Help me build a tool set to be able to do X, Y, Z. And this is using Claude Code, of course, but and it built out the tooling and figured out and built the Python scripts to parse the XML and pull everything out. So after doing that and using that as a project, I'm like, well, hey, what else can we do? Can we turn this in? What can we do so I can reuse this? And it recommended, well, let's go ahead and build a plugin. So it built the plugin. And then I wanted to be able to share that with other people. So I had to then, of course, push it to my GitHub so that I could share it with other people. So I've got this in GitHub. So if anybody's interested and wanted to try it out, you're more than welcome to. And we'll share that, I'm sure, with the video. But at this point, like I pointed at that folder and I've got an XML file in there. Actually, I've got 2 XML files. That's demo maps widget, which is one of our this is a really old FileMaker file, but I needed something to demo with. And then the PBS widget itself. So this is just the XML, and this would be, if you're in FileMaker and you go up and you'd say tools and you'd say save as XML, and then you point it at a folder and it saves that XML. And I did it. We had 2 files, this file and another FileMaker file. So I did it with both files. And so then from inside Claude, I pointed at that folder, and then because I've created the plugin, I make it easy. So I can just do a slash, and I can do FM, and these are the FM tooling that I have in that plugin. One is FM setup, review, and query. So in this, I would do FM setup and say, let's go. And of course, it's going to go ahead and start working away and figuring it out. I also, of course, have it already ran where it went in and did that. It's going to ask some clarifying questions. Like right away, it's going to say, oh, there's 2. Which file do you want to use? And one, other, both, right? You can pick it. If it has any other follow-up questions, it'll ask them. But in this instance, I selected both of them. So it says, I found the DDRs, here's the 2 files. Let me ask which one you want. And I said, do both, right? So then it indexes them for it so that it can easily manage them using this tooling. And in one file, we've got, 1 table, 37 fields, 31 scripts. The other one, just gives the detail about it and lets us know, where they're at. So then I want to review it, and I want to code review it. So then I do it at the next one, which is like /FM review is my prompt. and that sends it off to go ahead and then review the both of them and do a full code review. And of course, at that point, it asks, do I want to do both, or do I want to just do one, and how many scripts do I want to do? Do I just want to do a single script? And if it's a bigger solution, I would just pick the scripts that you want, or tell it that up front, right? And in order to tell it, I would say /fm-review, and then the name of the script, or a class set of scripts, or whatever. It's, you can just talk to it, right? So it's super easy to get it to do what you want it to do. You're not having to over clarify stuff. So then it goes through and it tells me, in this review, it goes through and lists out all this different stuff, and that's helpful. But realistically, I wanted to be able to see it in a browser and then be able to interact with it. So part of it I has it built so that it automatically builds a web page of it, so that it's easy to interact with that. And so this is this is what it ends up looking like. Here we've got an overview of the 10. Here you can see the different. These are all the scripts that it's looking at for both solutions. We can see which ones are high, medium, and critical. We look at one of the critical ones. It takes us to the individual script. We can see the script on the left-hand side here, and then it tells us, what's the critical problem with this, so on and so forth. We can look at it, and you could say here, counter increment via let in a throwaway set variable, and I click on it. It says step 30, so it's highlighted, so I can see, right? And it's telling me, recommendations. Before, this is what it looks like. After, this is what you should this would be a good example. And I can copy that XML and then go into that script. Like, so if I'm doing a code review, I'm like, oh, okay, that seems reasonable. Let's do that. You can just copy it, go into a script, and I could find that script that it's in, and I could paste it in wherever it needs to go, so on and so forth. So makes it super handy, of course, to code review.
You've got the Monkey Bread plugin installed to facilitate that pasting, right?
Yes, yeah, and that is key. I actually, like a lot of developers, I have a couple of different copies of FileMaker running on the machine, and in order to support different clients for the different versions. And I had the Monkey Bread software, the current one, in for an older version of FileMaker, but in the most current FileMaker version, I hadn't updated the plugin, so it wouldn't paste in. I'm like, what is going on? And I was telling Claude, like, that's not working. Why isn't it working? It's like, well, I think we're going to have to build a such and, and then I realized that the Monkey Bread software plugin wasn't up to date. So I really like Monkey Bread software's plugin now. It's great, but I need to make sure always to be using the latest version to get it. Yeah.
It's
So
funny. Sometimes we grow to think that Claude is doing a pretty good job, but once in a while it is really wrong.
yeah, well, yeah, it is AI, and it's going to be really helpful, and at the same time, it can get things wrong. Usually, it is pretty good about recognizing when it is and says that it's iffy. But like any of them, if it fully thinks something, even if it's wrong, it might still try and lead you down that path.
What was your total back and forth time to build this out? Do you know?
For building it out, surprisingly, it wasn't a ton. Setting it up so I could demo it for the thing took actually about, it was about 2 or 3 hours last night, maybe a little over 3. And that was more like cleaning it up, but getting it ready for GitHub, and then testing it, pulling it, testing it, pulling it, testing it, all of that sort of back and forth. But the actual initial build, like, I just kind of gave it instructions, let it go, tested it. I was like, oh, it would be nice if I had, because after I did it and I had this, oh man, this is great. It did a comparison of the different code that it was reviewing. I'm like, it'd sure be nice if I could just copy that in. And you could, of course, copy the whole script in, right? But not all of the script steps easily transfer via this process, depending on the solution. So you can have a couple little problems. So if you did copy a whole script like that, and we go into FileMaker, I have no idea how well this is going to work. But if we did a new script and we pasted it here, it gets most of it, but it may miss a couple of pieces, like this script reference that it has, isn't there, and so on and so forth. So I think using it in a controlled sense is really the better way for this, just straight copy and paste. But yeah, so kind of fun. Go
That's
ahead.
very cool.
What are some of the technical requirements for setting this up? You know, you had mentioned that you had to have a specific version of Monkey Bread software, but between the different versions of FileMaker that are out there, different operating versions of operating systems on both platforms, are there some gotchas we have to be careful about here?
Not that I've run into. I mean, like it's just a plugin for Claude. So here's the GitHub repo. You can just basically you could tell Claude, put this URL in there and say, hey, can you install these plugins so I can use them in my Cowork? And like that's as hard as it is. You don't even have to like go here, pull this down, do some sort of installation. It'll take care of all that for you. So and of course, a word of warning, if you are working with any plugins or that, you do want to make sure that you do like look through it and make sure that you're not, you know, because there's Python scripts in here, and who knows, right? Anybody on the internet could put whatever they want in the Python scripts, and you don't want to just download anything at random and run it on your computer. But yeah, it's as easy as that. And then you can have Claude do a full code review of it, and so on and so forth. But you do want to be a little careful of vetting stuff before you pull it in on your computer and let it go crazy with your LLM. So,
well, I would be, I'm just thinking, do I need to be concerned about script steps if I've got a client with an older version of FileMaker that it doesn't suggest some sort of correction for a script step that doesn't exist in that version?
Well, you could define it, especially like I tooled it for the latest version of FileMaker. But you can have an open conversation. So I could be like, can you tell me about what can you tell me about the schema? Ask it like, what about the such table, blah, 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 right? Like, I'm a little curious about this relationship or this calculation or, and it can, because it has access to the XML and it's referenced and indexed it can come back and speak to it very clearly. And then from other things from there, building on the tooling, I had been like, well, let's, maybe it would be helpful if it could recreate the schema or recreate the entity relationship diagram, just like we have in FileMaker. But, when you have a complicated ERD and you're trying to look at the different things, because it has access to it, it can do that. So I was like asking it, well, it might be nice to have that in the code review where it like would show, it would show the different anomalies. If we looked at the ERD, we were looking at the ERD in here, be able to look at the, any concerns that it has exactly as they relate to the ERD that you would look at in FileMaker. And I was starting to work down there, but the value for that didn't seem as like worthwhile. I think in the instance when that does come up, it takes some tweaking and stuff to make it work. And I think this is for being able to code review has been super helpful. Yeah, and it goes through pretty exhaustively and has like some great, medium, critical, so super helpful. And this isn't like the end all, but like it'll tell you everywhere that it thinks something's off in a particular script and so on and so forth. And it's like, oh, maybe you should change this or so super handy.
I know the XML file is pretty wordy, and I was playing around with a preprocessor for de-wordifying it. But Nick, I think you were talking about that too. How are you dealing with that?
So what I'm doing is more of trying to use Claude or Gemini, whichever, as a development tool instead of reviewing complete code after the fact. Which you can do that too, of course, but while I'm actively developing, I'm constantly downloading new XMLs and asking questions about something, or even just double checking an assumption that I've made that may or may not be correct. Or a great example would be, we have this one project we're working on where we're migrating client off of an older system. It's a SQL database. And, we build a table that's supposed to resemble a table from there and misunderstand what one of the fields is supposed to be. If I have the XML available and Claude can easily read that XML, then I can ask it, hey, I'm going to change this to that and delete that field. What all is going to be effective? What all do I need to change? Similar to what FM Perception will do for you, but with FM Perception, then you've identified all the different references and you have to go look at each of them individually to confirm, this won't be affected, this will be affected. Claude capable of, answering those questions for you and telling you, step by step exactly what needs to be updated. So the problem I've run into though is with some of the really complicated XML files is they're huge. So I asked Claude, like, hey, I'm going to replace this field with a different field. That field could appear in the XML in like 50 different places. 50 different tags, I think they're called. All throughout the different catalogs that appear in that XML. So it may find, 40 of the instances and think it covered all of them, and entirely miss things. So what I've been doing is using a Python script that isn't quite perfect, but it's a work in progress that will convert that XML file into Markdown format, which is the same language that the AI speaks to us in, so it's kind of perfect. And I basically just have it parse out the base tables, the table occurrences, so the base table and the TO, and then the relationship, the fields and field definitions for every table, and then the script steps, and the custom functions for any steps in the scripts that are using them. There's a lot of databases I've come across in the past where you might have like 100 or 200 custom functions, because of some plugin or something or add-on, but only a handful are being used. In that case, I don't need to overwhelm Claude with, 190 of them when only 10 are actually in use in scripts. So I have it automatically filter those. But I'm probably running into the same thing that Xandon was running into, where it's not perfect trying to extract scripts. Certain...
Yeah, well, and that's where it actually got better for me, was letting it. So it's running Python scripts that are creating an index for SQLite, right? So that's not Claude at all. But it then makes it very easy for Claude to parse that information instead of traversing a ridiculously large XML file.
Right.
It can go specific, it can grep to those specific pieces or whatever tooling it's using to go and reference, like you said, all 40 of those field references, and then look at each of them from that perspective. And when it boils it down at that level, and Claude is able to look at those individual snippets really clearly and not trying to hold context to the entire XML document, it's really solid. Like, it's really good at that. It's so much so that I had a client, this is one of the things, like a client said that they did this on this page, and then such and such happened. And so I took a screenshot of the page, showing also the name of the layout, put that into Claude, and I said, and gave it exactly the information that the client had said. And I says, what do you think could be doing this? And it referenced that layout, all of the scripts on that layout, all of the buttons on the layout, and then traversed it to look at what could possibly be causing the type of problem that they're experiencing, listed those scripts, and so on and so forth. So like, almost like if you could pre-vet it, that was the idea for this whole thing, was like, maybe if you could have it just pass it the XML automatically, it could do this like prepping for the developer, like, oh yeah, just go into the script, this is probably going to be the change, like do all the heavy lifting.
It sounds like we actually did a lot of the same stuff.
Which is awesome,
pretty
right?
much the same thing. And it's perfect because actually then you kind of have, two different independent minds, like each doing trial and error and figuring out what's working well, what isn't working well.
Oh, I've been having Claude do a similar sort of preprocessor to take the save as XML file and get it into a format that is less wordy, so that you're not consuming, in my case, mostly so it could get inside the context window. comfortably inside the context window, and also to save token count.
Right.
But
Which is definitely huge. Because Claude loves to chew through tokens, more so than the other AIs I've used. So anything I can do to reduce that is great.
Yeah, I've got an XML here in front of me right now that's a one layout file I created this morning for something else, and it's almost 8,000 lines. About half of that is the CSS, actually. So something like in that case, it'd probably be worth just parsing out the CSS before ever even feeding it to AI.
Right. Yeah, I don't even let the AI see the XML. I mean, I'll keep it in the folder so that in case something is wrong, I can have it like reference an ID for a layout or a script or something, and go look for that in the XML. But 99% of the time, I only have it looking at my schema markdown file. And I've actually gone a step further with that and started using a template report config file where I say, hey, I only want you to include these tables, or I don't want you to include those tables, because that way, if you're working in a folder that has multiple developers, or sorry, in a database that has multiple developers, and you're really only trying to check the things that you built or the areas that are going to be affected. It's great being able to filter out all the extra noise.
Just as an example, the preprocessor I was working on, and I haven't tested this yet at all. I've been laying the groundwork for this Dave's XML stuff I've been playing with, and the Python preprocessor that Claude wrote to take the XML and convert it into a JSON file. It converted the 78 meg XML file into a 1 meg, less than 1 meg JSON file. And I haven't tested it enough yet to know if it lost anything. But it's still a massive reduction in the size of and the amount of data that it has to keep track of.
Yeah, it's funny because I love it that we're all, and this is sort of the joy of working with AI for me at this point, is like we're actually just building our own tooling to solve problems, and it's now good enough that it's being able to build that tooling not necessarily on the fly, but like pretty close to it. Like you think about these different problems that you're running into and how you would have approached them a couple of years ago, and you would have thought, oh, now I've got to go through and FM comparison or FM perception and trace each line and so on and so forth. And now we can actually have it build the tooling almost on the fly and start using it right away. That part's really exciting for me. It's sort of like it's going into a candy. It's like, I keep bringing back this analogy. Back when I first started using FileMaker was so much fun because it allowed you to do these things that you couldn't do. It allowed you to put pieces of the puzzle together and accomplish different tasks. And, you could get around all sort of IT problems that connected different things. And there would always seem to be a workaround to be able to make it do what you needed it to do. And you do have to do a lot of work to get there, but like there were no other options really without that I could see from my limited, experience at that time. And now that's kind of where I feel like AI is at. Like we're getting access to this ability to build tools on the fly. And it's super exciting because you're not held back. It's like I don't know. It's super fun. For me, it's like the Swiss Army knife of the future. Like you can use it for everything almost, right?
One thing I think we'd all like to do is be able to chat back and forth with FileMaker to do scripting versus being able to just copy and paste from Claude. And so if anybody's watching this and missed the FM disk presentation last month, Canadian developers working on a tool for that includes a FileMaker plugin that lets you chat back and forth to make script changes, somewhat like you can already do in Claude for other languages, but for FileMaker. That's something interesting to take a look at if you haven't seen that. Anyway, we should wrap that up. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
And I'll see you next time.
All right. Thanks, guys.
All right. Bye, guys.
Thank you for spending your time with us at the FileMaker DevCast today. We hope you found something useful, something thought-provoking, and something to take into your own development approach. Things to help you be more productive and to allow you and your teams to get more done in less time. You can find us online at portagebay.com and filemakerdevcast.com. Also, follow us on our social media accounts at Portage Bay or at FMDevCast. Please let us know if we can help you or your company with modernizing your approaches and streamlining your workflow. We look forward to seeing you during the next DevCast.